Yeah, welcome to the Internet of Things panel, and it's a very interesting topic to me because there's a lot of people talking about Internet of Things, a lot of media coverage, a lot of hype, if you will, about the Internet of Things, and I think today we have a very good panel with us who. And together we will kind of unravel, what Internet of Things is all about and all that. I guess before we start, maybe just a quick introduction from this side.
Yeah, so my name is Rob Smith. I'm from Salesforce.com, and I support our app cloud platform for Asia Pacific.
Okay. I'm Kok-Leong from McLaren Applied Technology. I'm responsible for our business here in Asia-Pac.
My name is Slats. I'm not really the co-founder, but I'm the community manager of the Things Network. And I'm currently managing over 150 communities in over 40 countries worldwide.
My name is Mok. I'm the CTO of StarHub. StarHub is a quad play service provider in Singapore.
Cool. So I think this morning our minister, Vivian Balakrishnan, made a very interesting, he said something very interesting, right, about building an operating system for Internet of Things. I mean, he didn't mention that specifically, but I think that's what he's talking about. So on this topic, do you think that Internet of Things is something that's overhyped? Or is it like the real deal, right? Any of you?
Maybe I'll start.
Yeah.
I think we are still in the very early days of Internet of Things. Even for us in the telco world, the standards for IoT is still not even there. But I think eventually it will be everywhere. I use the analogy of plastics, right? I saw in a presentation some time ago, in the 1950s, when someone say plastic, and you say, what do you use plastic for? But now if you look at yourself, everything on yourself is plastic, even though part of the clothes is there. So I think at the end of the day, once the technology is stable, it will be part of our lives and it will dominate what we do.
Yeah.
Okay. Any agreement?
I would say one of the things that we've seen a change over the past year, whereas a lot of companies were kind of asking about IoT, interested in the technology, and some of our leading innovative companies were actually implemented for several years. What we're seeing now is it's going from hundreds to thousands of our customers. So almost every enterprise customer we have in Asia is bringing up the IoT conversation. How is it going to impact my products? How is it going to impact how I deliver my services to my customer? How is it going to change the way that we interact with our customer? Because fundamentally, it opens up possibilities for using the insights from the products that you deliver, or using the insights from the behavior of the customers, and using that to either improve the service you deliver, improve the product itself, or improve things like operational efficiency.
Right. So I'm very interested in that. So the clients, the customers that you talk to, what industries are they from? What kind of applications are they looking at?
It's across the board. It's healthcare, medical devices. It's manufacturing, operational efficiencies, things like mining, to be able to have mining products that are service aware, so improve your operational efficiency. Automotive industry as well, telematics, being able to provide add value services within the car, even farming. So I would say almost every single industry that has products.
Yeah. So
maybe I can add something to that, because of course, what you said, it is a hyped term, and it's used for a lot of gadgets that are being developed in the past. But I see also more and more that a lot of different companies and also a lot of smaller companies are building now IoT applications.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be like big oil plants. It can also be a smart bike tracker or a smart parking sensors or these kind of things that are quite easy to implement.
Okay. Cool. What are some of the most interesting, IoT-related apps or services you've seen? May not be the most practical, but
I have a lot of examples of what I'm seeing around there.
Yeah.
I think a very interesting one, which I discovered recently, that a company in Japan is building a sensor network, and that is around the area of Fukushima with the nuclear disaster. And that enables real-time information about the radioactivity level that is out there. And it provides data if whether it's safe or not to be at a certain area.
Okay. So, so Mark mentioned something very interesting about, IoT. It's still in the very early stages, and it'll be some time before we see it becoming really common. So, how far away do you think we are from that stage, right?
I think this is an ongoing process,
Yeah.
right? And we're at the start of the journey only, right? So I think a lot of people talk about sensing, control, right? But that's just the first part, right?
Okay.
Then you have got transmission, of course, you have the bandwidth. And the most important thing, like Rob mentioned, is really how we can actually derive the insights coming out from those data. And the way I perceive it is, eventually there is, the need to try and characterize or model that, because it's only with characterization and modeling, whether is it, a product or a process or a system, then, it is actually the first step towards trying to predict what comes after that, right? And it's really after the prediction that you can then do optimization, and eventually the intervention back there that is going to create a positive impact. I think if you look at the end-to-end stack, then, coming back to your earlier question, I don't think IoT is overhyped in that sense, right? So it's a matter of how you interpret what IoT means.
Yeah. How do you interpret what IoT is?
So I look at two aspects of it, right? There's a convergence between the physical world and the cyber world.
Right.
So it's internet and the things, right? So things, you can actually use it. Well, the most obvious thing will be to try and sense, right? So sensing is actually one part of it. And then, of course, as part of the journey, as you were saying, there is the need to analyze, what, or try and make sense out of that data. And I think right now, with the computing power, obviously, it's actually the internet side of things that you will actually take that to the next step, right? So we'll try and do that analysis, the modeling at the internet side of things. And eventually, I think it could actually come back down where, that logic gets pushed back down to the things and that's where it gets operationalized,
Right.
in a way, where you actually push that logic out to the edge of the network. And, for safety, mission critical kind of application, you would probably need that to reside at the things.
I agree. I mean, if you look at the automotive industry, you used to buy a car, and once you purchased the car and you left the dealership, you were responsible for managing if anything went wrong with the car, right? There might be a little, dumb light that shows up on the panel to tell you to bring it in. What we're seeing is that the car can actually be a platform for that engagement, and for using those insights and behavior to actually make the car much better. And if you look at the model with Tesla, the fact that they can understand the behaviors of how the cars are being driven, they can then use that and model it to make a better experience, to actually improve the efficiency of the car. And that's something that you couldn't do years ago, because you didn't have the connected data coming from the telemetry from the car, and you didn't have this platform as a two-way platform, like you said, to optimize the experience of the car once you've learned something about the behavior.
I think it's already here in some sense, right? I mean, for us, we have a service that we actually sell to some of the fleet owners to have onboard monitoring of the driver's behavior. So if there are some drivers that that generally want to accelerate or brake very suddenly, we're able to flag that out. So today it's available in a small group, but eventually, as it's embedded in all cars, then you find that all these will help improve our insurance premium, for example, or our safety records. Paul?
So I sort of travel the world, and Mark knows that I travel an awful lot and talk about IoT with most governments and most operators around the world. So you're asking, is IoT here? So let me give you a little vision from a Huawei's perspective. But a simple thing would be, the alarm turns on, a day in the life of Paul in the future. The alarm will turn on telling me to get up. In Hong Kong 2 years ago, when I stand naked, probably in front of the mirror in the bathroom, it will tell me all my BMI. I can put my finger on the countertop and it will put a small pinprick and it will sample my blood and it will start to do some real-time analysis. On the mirror, everything that's on your mobile phone that you see here, with Facebook and Twitter, your emails, the temperature, the weather pattern, etc. Take an umbrella, the train is running late. That's old technology. A day in the life begins like this. I'm asleep in bed. My alarm clock would go on at 7 o'clock, but it doesn't go off at 7 o'clock because the nanotechnology that's been inserted into my blood detects that Paul is coming down with a bug, a flu virus. It knows that it's raining outside, so therefore 80% of the people in the meeting today will also be delayed because of the traffic or the trains. Paul is not well, or becoming not well. He could do with 2 hours rest. Therefore, will automatically reschedule the meeting and advise everybody else who's participating in the meeting. So you just mentioned about the analytics. We believe that the real IoT is this ecosystem based on understanding behavioral characteristics, whether they're consumers or machines, and the relationship between people and machines. So if you think about these things, in the future business models in a smart home might be that my wife can't cook, and I've just had some very delicious Thai food, and I go home and I say to my wife, I would like this, please. She doesn't know how to cook it, but on the kitchen top there is a video that will show her. But moreover, it'll say, Paul, your cholesterol is too high. You can't have the prawns. We recommend something else. Moreover, it'll say, I know what's in the fridge and you don't have these ingredients, so the next best meal is this. And then it will be the owner of my digital life, probably a telecom company, will say, Paul's family spends $1,000 per week on groceries. Right. Which customer, which vendor would like to bid for Paul's lifestyle? And I think this is how IoT will profoundly change behavior.
Yeah. So you brought up some very fantastic scenarios as to how IoT can potentially impact us, right? So what are we still lacking, right, to be able to get to that, tech utopia that we speak about? Like, what still needs to be done?
Well, maybe to add to your story a little bit, I think if you're talking about the Internet of Things, it's not something in the early phase that you will see a lot in your daily life. But you're seeing that the world around us is getting more and more developed and getting more and more smart. So the cities you're walking around will be cleaner. Like the air around you will become cleaner. You have better access to better healthcare issues. And I think there the real value lies.
I think to add on to what Paul has said, right? You asked what's needed to be done to actually proliferate this whole revolution. First and foremost, I think standards have to be in place.
Correct.
I think by middle of this year, there will be a narrowband IoT standard that allows the communication between the sensors and as well as the back to the core. The second one is like, in order to actually have the kind of vision that Paul painted, you have a very smart analytics platform. And I think that's starting to come about because you have to take sensors, infusion, many sources. And last but the most important, I think, is actually about security. Just imagine that if all of these devices are connected to the internet, you can't have an AV in every small device that's on your clothes or on your specs or whatever. So the security device will have to be somewhere at the core, for example. I think those are some of the prerequisites before we actually have more and more applications on the IoT space.
Yeah, this is actually fundamental. Yeah. Security, interoperability, standardization are probably the three things. And as Mock said, that'll be standardized the middle of this year for one part, the NB-IoT. I think the components of interoperability, because the number of vendors that are selling things, sensors, will proliferate. The number of applications will proliferate. Who is going to be responsible for making sure that everything works? Will you buy a camera from 7-Eleven? Will you buy it from StarHub or somebody else? Who will you trust?
Yeah. So just a question from the audience that's getting decent number of votes, and it's related to security. So Internet of Things may affect our privacy when used without our knowledge when it becomes a norm, when everyone can implement it. So will Internet of Things bring rise to new problems we aren't ready for?
Yeah, I think that the service that's delivered has to have transparency around the trust between the company that's delivering this product or service and the customer. Otherwise, that'll be part of your brand. So being transparent about how the data is used and disclosure, and giving the customer the freedom and option to opt in or opt out for some services. Maybe you don't want to, certain customers don't want to disclose that much information publicly. Some customers are fine with broadcasting that on social media, and they're fine with broadcasting all of those behaviors, what they ate last night, what's in their fridge right now. But being transparent, giving the option, and then also there are emerging standards for security guidelines and also having like third-party compliance. The other part of it is, what are the rules and regulations around PII? They are definitely going to need some changes in terms of how they respond to technology, knowing if a device knows all of your behaviors, where you are at any moment, is that PII identifiable data? Will there need to be some legislation around restricting how that data is used?
Okay. So we talked about security, right? Like having a secure network of sensors and connecting that to a platform, and obviously having a common set of standards for IoT. How many years out are we from having that sort of standards, you think? 5 years? Less?
I think narrowband IoT will be standardized this year.
Yeah.
We'll probably see devices towards the end of this year or next year. I think in terms of the analytics platform, in terms of security for IoT devices, I think we are starting to see some of it already. So I would think that the platform is almost ready by, let's say, towards the end of this year or early next year for standardization. But besides that, there will be other players, like Sigfox, like LoRaWAN. There's also coming up with alternative, non-standard stuff. So everybody is trying to see what they can do to grab some money out of this new phenomenon that we're seeing in front of us.
Yeah. And maybe if I can add something, because we are using the LoRaWAN technology,
That's right.
so that's a different standard again. And I think it will cost a few years before the real standards arrive, and definitely because we are using the LP1 technologies, that stands for low power wide area networks, and it can definitely cost a few years because there are very strong standards around there. But the message I would like to give is that you shouldn't wait for these standards to arrive, and you really should start developing your IoT applications today, because the technology is available, and it's not an excuse to wait for the standardizations.
Yeah. And actually, rather than answering your question that way, I think IoT should be looked at as well, segmented by industry, right? So you look at the consumer side, you look at the industrial side of things, right? I think all those privacy things that we talked about earlier on, they're probably more sensitive when you talk about consumer application, like how are these information going to be shared. But when you talk about specific industry, for example, you were saying mining, and you were talking about standards, right? So, for example, if I were to deploy a LoRa network, instead of the typical GSM network, within a confined space, within a single stakeholder, I think, it's going to be much easier, and even, the management of the data, the security, everything, and the specific needs of that industry will probably determine the pace at which what you consider whether we'll get there eventually, right? So it may be niche areas within industry that, that may actually, where this kind of adoption will actually take place faster, rather than, broadly speaking about IoT in general.
Okay. Yeah. Perhaps I'll add just two arguments to these two here, and the third one. What we see is absolutely definitive. The standardization will occur. The reason we talk about the standard is in the 3GPP. And why, when I speak with all the major operators in Europe and the US, why they're very particularly keen that the vendors, Huawei, Ericsson, NSN, etc., focus and standardize this, at least the narrowband IoT protocol. It's because the 3GPP has not been hacked, first point.
Yeah.
All the others are absolutely hackable. But they're operators, and we like to be very conservative. So we have a rate of progress. But you're quite right about the innovation, the small companies, and using other proprietary solutions. In the home, for example, the smart gateways, the home gateways, you can buy most of the things that connect to everything from anybody.
Yeah.
And that's driven by innovation. But coming back to the point that you just made about the data and the analytics and the applications and other things, just now, I just turned on the phone, and there's my friend Google, because I've just arrived in Singapore. The first thing Google asks is, can I know your location, accept or decline? As soon as you say accept, that's the last piece of information they needed from Paul, to know it's Paul. And every single application that you download today for free, you must tick all the boxes that says everything on my phone is now known by them. So the components of just the question here about privacy and security, that they are different issues, but the component about privacy is pretty much given away because there's no standardization in the application development area, and that will come, as Mock just mentioned. First we're doing the air interface, then we'll do the core, you're now mentioning about the analytics platform, and then the privacy of information. And certain countries have very robust standards. Singapore, Germany, for example, the European Union, everybody has a slightly different spin on the standards. And they are being driven by government's regulatory policy as they understand better what's happening. The security from a network perspective, I believe the big vendors and the big operators will address and are addressing this year. And I think the combination of these two things will allow the IoT to start to enable a better life, which is what it should be about.
I can't help but look at the questions and say that, someone wants to short StarHub stocks. I want to try and explain, right? Number one is that we're testing Sigfox, LoRaWAN, as well as Narrowband IoT. So, and we are doing trials with Huawei and the government on IoT itself. Number two, in a down market like today, the telco shares will be very strong because we are very good dividend players, right? We pay very good dividends. So I want to try and set it to rest before we go on. Thank you.
I'll buy StarHub stocks, I guess. So, okay. So I want to come back to this thing about analytics and making sense of data, right? Because all these data come in. We look at the numbers. It's really hard as a business person, a decision maker, to kind of make sense of this deluge of data. We have the sensors, we have the analytics platform. So, like, how are we realistically going in the future for business people, for CEOs, for decision makers, to kind of make sense of all the sensors, the data coming from the sensors, and so on?
I think first you start out with understanding what the value is you're going to deliver,
Sure.
and to who. If it's to your customer, understand their customer needs. So for a utility company to understand that, in Asia, the utility bill makes up a larger percentage of their total income. So they're always interested in lowering their bill. So how do you use technology like smart meters to provide the right data at the right time to lower that, so it's easy for the customer to consume and they still get great value? And then the second thing, there has to be compelling value for you as a company. So lowering the cost of the cost of the technology is always going lower and lower. So now things that were not viable just 2 or 3 years ago are now viable because the chips are becoming much cheaper, much lower power, many more sensors, and the ability to execute and deploy things like analytics in the cloud for very massive data volumes, hundreds of millions of data events. To be able to do that at a low cost makes it compelling. And then you're actually delivering great value and a great service. One of the questions I saw here is about Google Nest giving up on IoT. One of the things there is that it's becoming ubiquitous with, now when you go out and you buy not just Nest, but you buy like an Emerson or Philips thermostat or whoever else, they're going to have those services built in. That's kind of becomes the standard. The second one is your utility company is going to get to the point where if you leave the aircon on and you leave, they can actually, your app will notify you that, hey, your normal behavior has changed and we see an anomaly in your electric usage. And okay, my smart home system will be connected and I click and I turn off the aircon.
Right.
So I think it's got to deliver compelling value first.
Right. So like situational awareness, I guess, like a sixth sense, right? Being able to be aware of things that you otherwise wouldn't know because the sensors are there to tell you about it, right? So there's an interesting question here. I think Google, right, recently gave up on IoT via Nest, right? So any thoughts on that? What does that say about the future of IoT?
So I think the Google Nest product, I mean, I don't want to criticize products and things like this, but we're just talking about the standardization.
Yeah.
And what operators are doing is trying to standardize what we call the far field, the outdoor field, okay? So it's the outside the home specifically, even though the lower frequencies, 700, 850, 900 megahertz will certainly penetrate buildings very easily, and you will expect a lot of the narrowband IoT, the connectivity things, to move from outdoor to indoor. But indoor, the challenge in indoor is that there is no standard. It is the Sigfox and the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth predominantly, and Zigbees. So they're a fundamental problem. The other one is, and I think you have a second question here which relates to the urgency and business values. It's about where's the money? What problem are we trying to fix, or is it something we're trying to do as a showcase? So we did some studies. The UK, 44% of people, houses, said they will pay money if somebody just reduces my power bill by 5 or 10%. So there's a business opportunity. Whether you want to track your grandmother, whether she's still alive in bed, there's another business opportunity from other. But there's a lot of range of opportunities that IoT can help. And what we're trying to do in Huawei and with our partners, the operators particularly, is to look at certain types of markets. You know, e-health is a very significant one. We're aging population here, huge expense in Europe of populations like this because of either education in certain cities or because of poverty or lack of employment prohibits people from getting access to good health. So how does IoT help benefit each of these? And I think this is where the business of IoT, how will IoT help improve each of these? Bigger market space, bigger share of the wallet, reduction in government spending, reduction, as you mentioned, insurance costs. Why are all these things so expensive? Somebody also mentioned about the stock market and other sorts of components or the micro. I think this morning the minister was mentioning about how quickly the transactions could occur in a couple of microseconds. IoT will generally improve a lot of these things. And I see the rate of innovation, the rate of progress of this innovation is so quick because of computing power you just mentioned, the power of analytics, that I see a very exciting future over the next just couple of years. Cancer. You know, can you imagine that the entire DNA sequence has been fixed for breast cancer? It's only a year or two away probably that won't exist anymore. For example, IoT will be, you know, you talk about bots and everything, it will be an injection with nanobots running around your body doing how will these things be enabled? Those things are not, this is not science fiction, this is real, this is happening. When I look at the research that NUS is doing and other startups are doing here, these are the things that are all enabled by this concept of IoT. But the biggest cost is in the storage of the analytics and the power. Because if the minister would like 100 million connections here in Singapore, that's big data warehouse is going to cost more and the power consume more and cost more than probably the connection.
But thankfully, Singapore is a small country. our data 1 year is probably 1 day's data in China or the US. So, you know, if anything, if we can test here, we can test in Singapore before anybody else.
This is key.
But I agree with Paul. I think the sense is that, you know, what is the business model? It's not the technology, it's not, you know, the standards, but what is the business model that you want to use IoT today? I think we're still grappling with it. And that, once we break it through, we will see proliferation of the devices.
Yeah, like you bring up a good point about the hidden costs, right? The storage of the data and so on. So, any predictions as to, you know, where IoT is going to have like the biggest impact, you know, in the next few years? Because you guys mentioned so many potential applications, right? So, any stab at?
I think there's a chance that the impact could be from a business model perspective.
Sure.
Right? So, for example, the fact that now you can monitor, you can actually track the health of equipment. So I think the model will be, there could be a shift from a capex, you know, basically selling of capital goods to selling a service, right? Because today, if I imagine I'm actually selling an electrical submersible pump that I put into the well hole, you know, in the past, if we were to sell just the pump will stay there. You know, if the pump fails after 5 years, basically the company will have to actually put another pump there. So right now, the fact that I can actually monitor the condition of the pump, and if I can actually predict when the pump is going to fail, then I think as a company, I'll be more ready to say, look, you know, perhaps, you know, I'm going to sell you based on performance. I will sell you based on the lift of the oil coming out, right? So you don't have to buy the pump anymore. I'll put it in there and you pay me based on the lift. So I think there is a potential. I mean, using this as an example, I'm sure there are actually other cases whereby, you know, you can think of a change in terms of the business model altogether.
Yeah, and maybe what I'm considering, if you consider like the different markets, obviously there are like the agriculture, health, and smart buildings, and these are very booming, and these will become very big. But what we really try to do with the Things Network is to open up this whole technology to anyone to make use of it. So we are crowdsourcing an Internet of Things data network, and once someone has built a network, they open it up for anyone to make use of it. And we really have the vision and the mission that we support people, which can be anyone, like individuals, but universities, governments, and companies, smaller or bigger, to make use of the Internet of Things. And we really try to support people in creating very small applications, just within maybe a day or something. And we really try, and I think now is the time that the technologies are supporting it, and it becomes easier and easier to develop useful use cases. And I think that will really result in a lot of innovation about the Internet of Things by making it easy, accessible.
Yeah, like we might not even know, like the applications about IoT can't even fathom, right? So what about insurance? I think you mentioned that briefly. How would that look like with IoT? I mean, all of us buy insurance, so how is it going to change?
No, I think the very simple case is that based on your driving behavior, the insurance agents may look at this compared to the rest of the population and say, okay, you are low risk, therefore your premium is lower. I mean, just a very, very simple thing. Right? Yeah. For example, based on things that you do, a bank may be able to determine credit risks than what it can do today and give you a lower interest if you want to borrow money. So those are some of the things that I think will be enabled once we have more data through some of these devices and sensors.
And a big concern here, right, among the audience is related to insurance and all that. And so how will anonymity be affected by this, right? Because when I drive a car and being tracked, the insurance company knows about this, doctors and government. So, are we, entering a society where privacy doesn't exist anymore, or what are the social implications?
Privacy is a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, but today, many of our people today trust Facebook and Google better than they trust their own governments. Unfortunately, the amounts of information that Facebook and Google knows about us through the different interactions actually is quite a lot.
Yeah.
If you use Google, for example, they will know that where you're going every morning because of your driving route. So I think the foundation actually is regulations in terms of PDPA in Singapore, and to ensure that whoever holds the data will only use the data if there's consent. At the same time, I think there's a lot of anonymization has to go on, but eventually, I think it's up to the individual's responsibility to ensure that they safeguard some of their own information as well.
To show, I was with the VP of Facebook recently in Norway at a IoT or 5G conference, and he made a comment and he said, if privacy becomes hacked or a problem in our company in Facebook doesn't exist in 48 hours, quote unquote. And I leave you with a comment here, and that is, my wife sent me a message over WhatsApp actually, and she said, why is Facebook recommending my ex-driver to her to connect? I haven't used my driver in Malaysia for 3 years, and I don't use Facebook. Now there's the power of analytics and location and collaboration, and when you're talking about anonymity or personal information, it's, there's social behavior, you can't get around this problem, and I think regulatory policies and other things might become frameworks, and governments will do as much as they can, and standards bodies will all work together to do this. But it's, what's driving society today is social behavior, fundamental changes. Everybody sees this today as their view into the internet. I can remember when Windows first started up in the early 80s, and we used to print out everything on a piece of paper. We used to open it up and read through it, and I'm sure you're the same, Mock. After that, everything was a window. Today, it's not even a window. It's a 15-second, something that catches me between 9 and 15 seconds, and beyond that, I'm not interested. So the behavior, particularly youth, is driving this. But if I was a betting man, I think there's two areas where the money is. And one is how this behavior will transform for the next business opportunities. And the second one is addressing health, because the studies that have come from third parties show that by 2020, the addressable market in nine vertical markets is about $7 trillion, of which 1.62 comes from e-health. Another 700 is in waste management. So that's the biggest by far. That's the one that consumes particularly government and social money cost. And the IoT for sure, whether it's narrowband or broader band, the LTE-M, which is coming, that I think is where the two opportunities will come from an IoT. You'll see youth and social behaviour driving a lot of the opportunities here through the APP style that's been developed in this ecosystem, and the other one will be in a particular vertical market that will see a lot of improvement because of IoT.
So I want to touch on another thing about sensor technology, right? Sensors are fundamental to making IoT work, right? Gathering the data. So what are some advances or that we can expect to see in that domain, that department, in terms of sensors and all that?
I think the sensors that are being developed today, because Internet of Things is booming, they are dropping as we speak in price. And that again opens a lot of opportunities by lowering the threshold to make the investment for doing anything with the Things network. And we are focusing on the standard which is LoRa, stands for long range. And that's also gained traction in the world, and that enables economy of scale.
Okay.
And the sensors will have a longer battery life.
Battery life,
now sensors we are deploying in the field can last 10 years without changing batteries, for example. Sorry.
Yeah, as the sensors, the cost of the sensors goes down, the power of the sensors will go up. An example is to be able to have computer vision to understand your gestures. So rather than going to an interface and doing something either through my mobile phone, if I want to adjust the temperature, just make a gesture, and I'll have a device on the wall that will be able to read those gestures. The cost of the GPU processing for that, be able to recognize my gesture, make that command is actually going to go way down. And when it gets to a certain price point, that'll be viable for having, a $50 device on the wall that I'll be able to control my house via those gestures. We recently spoke to one of our customers in the semiconductor industry and asked them about IoT, and from their perspective, it is also changing their industry from the standpoint of it's all about low power, low cost, and providing single chips that provide the right mix of sensors and data and processing power. And those economies of scale are going to drive the ability to make these viable innovations, and we're going to see that change over the next few years.
Interesting.
So I have a slightly different view with regards to sensors, right? So obviously, as you know, the Formula One car has got hundreds of sensors on it. But I'm not sure whether anyone knows that actually for every single race, the number of sensors on the car is actually different. So basically, obviously, sensor is also weight, right? So we put the sensors there for that particular race for a purpose. So it's really value driven. So rather than get too obsessed over what sensors to put, there are even things today, for example, that you cannot measure. We would actually take an approach of using a surrogate or a proxy, or maybe a combination of low-cost sensors that can still derive the same value. But the power eventually is still the power of analytics, how you want to actually make use of the sensors. Even the placement of the sensors is really important. Can you imagine on a human, if you're going to be able to tell the gait, for example, walking gait or running gait, you need to determine, it could be just a simple activity sensor, but where you place it and the signal that you get out of it that you then analyze is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, getting the correct data takes a lot of expertise, right? Knowing where to put the sensors.
Yeah.
So we're almost running out of time, but just go around the table. What's a prediction for IoT that you have?
I predict it's going to transform the business models that we're seeing today. I think one of the things that you mentioned is this transformation from selling products and assets to selling services. If I'm selling either like a jet engine, a generator, or a thermostat, if I can provide the value to the customer and it becomes something more like a monthly subscription, then it's the service provider's responsibility to make sure that that device is delivering good value, that the motor or engine or generator is running at peak efficiency, versus you're selling the product and then, hey, you're responsible for it. You can call me if there's any service. It becomes the value of the service is what gets delivered, not the product.
I think it's definitely a necessity. to provide timely information to help us or to help operators and users react more decisively and to better respond.
Any thoughts?
I actually have two things to say about this. First of all, I hope that in the future, if we talk in a couple of years, that any one of you is able to build a useful application just within a couple of hours. And that's how I see the future in the first place. And the second thing is, what's typically because we are only guys sitting here, and it's still very technologically focused. So it's relatively hard, but it's getting easier every day. And I always joke about this, but we need more women around the Internet of Things. Because we need to shift from and I think we need to shift from a technological point of view to a more social, entrepreneurial point of view. And I think this is, among others, where we can use the women for.
Yeah, Mark?
I think the IoT is one of the fundamental building block of smart nation in Singapore. Singapore wants to be the IoT test bed, so we invite all of you to come and participate in this Singapore itself. But more than that, I think IoT will improve lives. For example, in Singapore, if you are a senior citizen, you are given a card, and if you're trying to cross a road across a traffic light, there are some traffic lights that if you tap the card against the light itself, it gives you about a few seconds more to cross the road itself. So in the future, with IoT, if I'm at a traffic light and I'm 10 years older, they'll know that I need a bit more time. Therefore, as I walk across, they'll give me more time to cross the road. I think that's the promise of IoT and Smart Nation, to be able to benefit us as individuals and not only as societies.
Yeah, it's the interaction between all of these devices yourself. You don't need to tap anything. My two predictions, as I said, anything driven by social, the application component, but related to the connection of things, the IoT, and I think really health. Profound things will happen in health over the next couple of years, largely driven by IoT. And I think combinations with the smartphone and medical techniques, and an example, plugging into the base of this and plug it in here, and it either goes red or green. And if it's green, I don't do anything. But if it's red, I also don't do anything, because the analytics from the heat map will show, and the flying squad will come in and quarantine us, and we don't have Zika tomorrow, for example. But it's those sorts of predictive things. You can do this with malaria, and they're experimenting now. 4 days before, once you've sampled, they can tell. You don't have to take any action, but then they can progressively take action at the right time and look for the root cause. So I think this is the change that IoT will bring, moving to the root cause and predictive improvements in health. That's what I think will happen. And just as you're saying, predicting that you're a bit tired, a little bit older, can't cross the road just as fast, so I'd better change it. Or predicting that I'm coming down with the flu, cancel the meeting, go in 2 hours later. I think it's this predictive ability, because of the analytics that's going on, connecting things that today don't seem to be connected.
Okay, so on that optimistic note, please join me in thanking our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.